Ken Ohashi, our guest today, is the CEO of Brooks Brothers. He turned a company from bankruptcy to over $1 billion of sale globally within a few years. He's extraordinary. We spoke about how to dress up or not dress up to an interview. What does AI do to your business? Plus, how you turn companies around. You're going to love this conversation. Hey, Ken.
Hi, Boaz.
Thanks for being with us. It's very exciting. I know you're very busy. You have a lot on your plate, right? And this podcast is not about fashion. So let me start with a question. Why fashion?
I sort of fell into it. That's the truth. And the thing I love about fashion is, one, it's an extraordinarily very difficult business. But the second one is, it really is about human psychology, and it's also this great combination of arts and creative expression, but it's anchored in a lot of business rigor. Yeah. If you can imagine, you're purchasing an inventory, you have timelines for it, so it's intense from all angles. I also love that, you get a scorecard every day. Your customer tells you how much they loved you or not.
Daily.
Daily,
not
hourly.
Even season or really? Is that really your experience, that daily you get feedback from the
Sure, of course. I mean, we look at sales every day, and we look at customer feedback, and what are the comments on the web, and we scrub all of that. So I think that it's dynamic, and I think the other piece of it is you could have a really bad season, and then you can recoup it. You can have an amazing season, the following 3 months. And so I really do love it. And I think the one thing that I really, really love about it is that I like things that make people feel something about themselves.
What do you mean?
I think, for Brooks Brothers in particular, I think when someone buys that suit and we see them put it on, and
they feel
it
like
instills.
Presidents. They feel like the president.
Oh yeah, all 41 out of 47 presidents put it on. But
the current one is not wearing Brooks Brother, right? Or are you
yes,
allowed to say he is?
Yeah,
wow.
Sure, he's a customer. So I think that watching that experience and watching people feel something and feel something about themselves, I think is really special. And I feel like.
But. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I said I love being part of that.
Yeah, but you said something in the beginning kind of caught my attention. You said I fell into it. Mm-hmm. How does one fall into being a CEO of Brooks Brothers? I don't know. I don't know too many people who walk on the street and just fall into being a CEO of a turnaround, which is what I want to talk more about, just a big brand, but how you turn things around. But that's later.
Yeah.
How did you fall into it?
I think I came out of college not knowing what I wanted to do. I went to go work for Arthur Andersen, a big accounting firm. It turns out I'm not a great accountant.
Did you study accounting in college?
I did. I studied accounting finance.
A kid from Long Island learning accounting. That's not very sexy.
I thought it was the safest. My dad was in the restaurant business, and I thought, I'm going to do something completely opposite that feels very, very, very white collar. And
very safe, right?
And very safe, yeah.
High risk and a lot of work, 7 days a week. And I don't have to tell you, you grew up probably, your dad was never around.
He was never around, and it was super erratic. And there was times when we were doing okay, and there were times where we were like, hey, we have no money for college for you, So I think I wanted something very stable, and didn't know a lot about. I wasn't really guided. No one told me, this is the breadth of jobs that are out there, and these are the opportunities. So I think at that point, I remember there was someone in church who was working at Deloitte & Touche, had become a CPA. I was like, I'm just going to do exactly what this guy is doing. And I think sometimes that's what happens. And then at Arthur Andersen, I worked in the consumer products group, which included fashion, advertising, pharmaceutical. And when Enron happened with Arthur Andersen, a company called Aeropostale, which is huge now, but at the time it was, call it a $300 million business, and Bear Stearns Merchant Banking had taken it over, and it was pre-IPO, and they needed someone to help take them public. And so it was that opportunity that fell in my lap, and that was 23 years ago. And
did you just grind? I mean, did you just? I'm trying to kind of look at the map, right? It makes. I love it. It doesn't make any sense to me. So here's this kid, right? Kid of immigrants, who, right? Your parents are from Japan. Grow up in a restaurant in the industry, in the restaurant industry, and then you're like, I'm going to go the opposite. I'm going to be safe and steady and boring to some degree because I need stability in my life, right? Then you go into it, but something called you in that fork in the road, right? To go to something much more flexible, dynamic, challenging. Yeah. What was the thing that? And by the way, it's interesting because, I have kids who are finishing college, my oldest, and you're supposed to give them advice. But here's your story. You studied one thing, you did one thing, and now you're like doing something completely different 20 years later. What was the fork in the road?
It was a failure. And, like right here, failures. So I took the job at Arthur Andersen, and it was a finance accounting role. It turns out I'm like really not great at like finance and accounting. And like, we were filing SEC reports, and those filings like required a lot of detailed work. And at one point, the CFO of Aeropostale turned to me and he said, "Hey, I don't think this role is for you."
Wow.
And
you
kind of
probably
like,
were very
you suck.
upset. Exactly. You probably were upset in the first moment, right? You were 20-something years old.
Yeah,
someone tells you.
I don't think you're as introspective when you're 27. I think you think that just because you're in a job, you should be good at it versus like, hey, is this job right for me? And I think it was the first time in my career where someone kind of like tapped me on the shoulder and was like, I don't think this is the right path for you. And at the time, we had already gone public, and we were on Wall Street. We had a big market cap. We had like 30 sell-side analysts following us. And so what I started really doing was working with the investors and the sell-side analysts as sort of a 50% of my job. And he gave me the opportunity to run investor relations and media for the company, which is obviously something very, very different than grinding out SEC reporting and so forth. And like, that was the unlock. That was really the inflection point where my career really took off. And I realized that I had a lot more art in my personality than I had ever tapped into. I do think I still have that, business side. I like math. I'm a CPA. I think that is the foundation of how I think about things. But at the same time, I feel like I have this creative energy, or I had this creative output that I think he really tapped into. So it was really through failure that my career started to accelerate.
And jumping to the thing you just said, how much of art is there in the day-to-day operation for you? Because you probably have to accept and love and appreciate art, but you're about a balance sheet at the same time. You can't just go crazy and do whatever artistically your team wants. Tell me about the tug of war between art and business in your day-to-day.
70-30.
Which one is what?
I would say it's 70 art. I mean,
70 art.
Yeah, I would say so,
that's surprising
because
to me.
I think where I sit, we have to manage the results, and I think the results part of the business is like really seeing things that other people don't see, and really understanding what the human psychology is. I think all those things are art when you have to take a leap and think creatively about the business, or think about the product, or think about who the target customer is, or whether you have to pivot. Like, these are all judgment calls, and I really put that into sort of the art side of the business. And the 30% of the business, I think for me, is really about the science of it. Let's look at the data. Let's look at patterns.
Okay, I'm so wrong about how I saw your business. That's great. I'm learning something. I thought, even though it sounds very glamorous, fashion is very hard work, obviously, but it's about leases, and it's about inventory management. It's about a cost of goods and tariff and all those things that will impact you. You're saying actually this is only 30% of the business.
Yeah, that's the easy part. Like,
really?
We have to predict the future. Like, the shirt that you're wearing, is that blue going to be important next year or not? Like, is that fabric going to be important? Like, what is going to be important to the customer next year?
You just made me conscious about what I wore for today's interview.
I'm judging
I'm
you.
sorry.
As
no,
we're
it's okay. I just threw something
I'm just
on.
kidding. You look great. But I mean, I do think we have to, constantly think about those things. We have to think about, we spend a lot of marketing money on what I call top of funnel, where there's no ROAS or there's no clear return, and we have to make calls there. I have to constantly make calls on people and human capital, and do we hire? Do we expand? How do we think about this? So, even today, one of my meetings today was about brand collaborations. Like,
Which you started right after you took over.
It was something that I feel really passionate about. We've done a bunch of great collabs. This was an interesting conversation because it was a conversation with an automaker who wanted to do a collab with us. But like, is that right for us? Is that not right for us? Like, how's that going to make the customer feel? So I think all that sits in sort of that art side of the business where I can substantiate some of my decisions through data, but at the end of the day, I think in my business, your gut instinct is very, very important. And I think there's two types of leaders, particularly in retail and fashion. I think there's one that, kind of like manages the business to outcome and results, and the other that manages to process. And
Which one are you?
I think I'm definitely the one that manages to outcomes. So I think, from managing from a process perspective, I think if your business is very consistent and you're selling the same thing year after year after year, like you're a hardware store, or, I think you can play a little heavier into sort of the science side of the business and the process side of the business. But I think for us, like particularly Brooks Brothers, the business is too dynamic. We have to be much more forward-looking.
Is there anyone who's selling the same thing for a long time? I mean, Levi's, but then eventually they became irrelevant.
Yeah.
I mean, when I grew up, everybody wore it. Now I don't see people wearing Levi's as much. I mean, I don't know the numbers, but is there anyone who's saying they've been doing the same thing for 50 years, or is the nature of fashion to always change? And
I think it's the bucket. So like I'll take the opposite example is Eddie Bauer, which I recently took over, which we are really working hard to reposition. That was a business that really focused on technical outdoor product, right? So like ski jackets and on the mountain, there's less art in that side of the business. That is really about a consistent business if you really think about kind of like that consumer.
Is it consistent? Is it because I'm thinking Patagonia, for example, right?
Yeah.
You might say Patagonia is like the higher end level of that. They created an image with the founder, and people wear on Wall Street Patagonia vests. They never walk into a ski resort with the same jacket, but it sends a message. It shows you there's messaging in the way you dress. So is Eddie Bauer? Are you trying to create a message? If I wear Eddie Bauer, therefore I belong to this group, or?
Yeah, I think the vibe, like, I think if you deconstruct brands, it's all about creating that vibe and that energy. And I think with Eddie Bauer, the energy so far, like I think historically has been very, very technical. So like Boaz loves to ski, and therefore he's on the top of the mountain. But I think the truth is when you really look at the Eddie Bauer consumer, what they really desire is a brand that has outdoor lifestyle or is outdoorsy. So it's not so much you being on the top of the mountain, more as like you hanging out in town off the ski resort, right? Or
it's
you
like
sitting by
Lululemon and the yoga pants. Like, a lot of, again, that's not my world, but I'm thinking it started as a yoga product. Most people wearing Lululemon are not doing yoga. They just want to put it on so it sends a message of casualness and like, I am kind of a yoga person, but they get into their cars and then drive around and get coffee with friends. This has nothing to do with yoga, right?
That's exactly it. So I think we're working to pivot the business to be way more lifestyle. And I think why that's also important is it just re-triggers more purchasing. So, I think one of the challenges with the company has been that it has been selling the same product year after year after year with very little variation. And I think that is very difficult over a long period of time for customers to come in and feel like they have something new to purchase every season or every year. So that's something that is probably our biggest priority point for Eddie Bauer right now.
So, okay, that's it points me to, you said lifestyle. So let's go back to Brooks Brothers. When I came to New York, that was what you wore on Wall Street, right? That was kind of like I made it. I became a junior partner in Saks Fifth Avenue, Goldman Sachs, And I go to Saks Fifth Avenue, I go to the store on Fifth Avenue, and I kind of dress up and I spend money on a tailored.
Yeah.
And then COVID happened, right? Casualness took central stage, and Brooks Brothers went into bankruptcy, and you guys picked it up. If I'm correct me if I have the information correct. If I don't have it correct, you guys picked it up from bankruptcy.
Yeah.
All right. So 2 questions I have. I mean, first of all, what do you do when something that was so fundamental is now gone? The market that you were counting on, that 3-piece suit, that very tailored look is disappearing. How do you deal with that?
Yeah. Yeah, it was tough, right? We were in the heart of COVID and we were selling dress shirts and suits. I think one of the things that we did was we repivoted pretty quickly. So the business was less than 20% what I call casual, the product that I'm wearing right now. I brought in a creative director. His name is Michael Bashan, extraordinarily talented and very well known in the fashion industry. But I knew that he had that bent and that eye towards casual products. So we accelerated the casual side of the business immediately. You pivot and you don't waste time. And I think you move into action relatively quickly. And that's what we did with the business.
Okay, so I want to pause on that because, again, like this podcast is about management, right? And about being a top performer. So here you have a product that one knows very well and it doesn't work anymore, right? And then I'm just assuming there's probably part of you or your team's view that is scared because we've been doing this thing and it worked very, very long. Maybe it's just a phase and we're going to go back to, will I lose my original kind of country club, golf players if I go too casual, right? At the same time, you understand this market is disappearing. So bring us into the boardroom. Bring us into the conversation you had when you took over the brand, and how do you find the balance between not turning your back on the kind of the DNA of the product, at the same time bringing innovation and creativity into it?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think we really spent a lot of time with the teams, like talking about like what makes Brooks Brothers Brooks Brothers, like what makes that shirt or what makes this garment that I'm wearing Brooks Brothers, even though it's super casual. And ultimately, it's really about luxe, quality, and craftsmanship and attention to detail. So even when we launched our athleisure product, which is like sweatpants and hoodies and sweatshirts.
But did you have like letters on it? Didn't people like?
Yeah, you can monogram it.
Monogram like
so
a
like that's
sweatshirt.
what made it like that extra luxe. And we used Sapima cotton, and we used beautiful, beautiful fabric. So like we still did in our handwriting, but we could pivot. It's the same thing as like when Porsche introduced its SUV, right? Like what made that? I think it's the Cayenne. What made that car still a Porsche, right? So like, I think there's ways to pivot into new categories, but everybody has to be on board. And I think the benefit that I had was I had a combination of new members that I brought onto the team and a combination of really legacy people who really knew where the future could be for Brooks Brothers. And that's the team that I formed. And I think we were all rowing in the same direction.
From the beginning? I mean, for me to understand, did you bring a new blood into an old system and they all got along? That's very rare.
Yes.
Generally, there's a clash. So I don't know what kind of a style of CEO would love to hear about. Are you someone who says, I'm sending 80% of people home because it's not going to work out? They're like stuck in an old way of doing business. I'm the new sheriff in town. I'm cleaning up, stuff and then bring my own team. It sounds to me like you actually blended new blood and old blood together and it worked out. So how did you do that?
I did. I mean, I think it's probably 60% new, 40% legacy. I think you have to spend time with people. And I think I think when you're doing a turnaround, you can't waste time and you can't have friction in the wheel. Like everybody's got to be rowing with you. And if they're not rowing with you, they have a choice to get on the ship or not. And I think I was very adamant that we make those decisions very quickly about executives. And we had to make a lot of hard choices in the beginning because I don't think everybody was. In the very, very beginning, I would say the first 30 to 60 days, I don't think everybody was rowing in that same direction, and we had to make those changes. But I think the people that have remained, and oh, by the way, the team that I kept is still with me today, and I'm in year 5.
It's been 5 years, right?
And
you have over $1 billion of sales. Then?
Yeah, we're $1 billion global, and one of the key people is my chief merchandising officer, my chief commercial officer. I mean, he's been with the company for 25 years, and you would think that he would be the one that was least resistant to change, and he was the one that was like most aggressive about change, because I think in his heart he knew what the business could be, and now sort of the handcuffs were off for him to really execute with me against that. So it was a really exciting time. I mean, we used to laugh that we were like the oldest, because Brooks Brothers is the oldest retailer in America. Abe Lincoln wore Brooks Brothers. And we invented so many trends that are out there in the marketplace that you see today. But we used to laugh that we were the oldest startup in America. And
do you succeed creating culture? Because it has to trickle down, right? Culture, startup culture is very different than established. And sometimes companies collapse because they're so good at startup, but then when they move into more infrastructure, deeper behavior, a behemoth of a company, they collapse, or the other way around. Companies became this behemoth, and it's hard for them. And when the market change or there's a need for adjustment, they're so big and inflexible and all that stuff that they can't do it, so they fall. You succeeded actually doing both. You think?
Yeah, I think you have to be really surgical about places where you need to stay scrappy and you need to shorten the decision-making timeline. And there are places where you're like, okay, we need more discipline here. This is good. This is a hot mess in this area.
And was it intuitive? How did you know? I mean, did you go? I mean, I don't think you have like a Harvard MBA or anything like that.
Nope.
But again, not good or bad. But how did you know what to do? It seems to me like you're saying it very casually, and you're a success story, but it is a big deal, and most people that I know will fail in that being brought in. First of all, so just to add one more element of question, was your board aligned with what you're up to? Because some people, they buy from bankruptcy, they just want result, and you said, look, guys, I need to understand what the hell is happening here, and how I find this balanced dance between what I respect the history, but still building a startup, right? So tell me about that thinking. And how did you learn to do that?
I think the board was very supportive. I think that's a good question. I think instinctively, dare I say, when you look at the executive team, there are 12. I have 12, big functions that sort of roll up on my leadership team, and you can kind of look at every single one of them and say, like, are we good, or do we need to like double down, right? Like, it's not like I try to take on everything. Philosophically, I really believe that if I keep my leadership team really tight to myself and I manage the culture, I really deeply care about them, that's just going to trickle down. So I think for me, it was really, the starting point was like, okay, what are the 12 basic functions that form a leadership team for a retail fashion company? And then just really looking at each function and be like, are we optimally running or are we not? And there were areas where I needed more muscle and I needed someone who had the experience to be more disciplined, and getting back to the place of like helping us really scale, and people who had the experience of scaling businesses. So,
did you bring someone with you? Is there someone like, how the White House, for example, like there's a core team that goes. They generally start with their governor or their congressman, and then they go with the same person all the way till he or she, hopefully in the future, will be president. Do you have a team that worked with you in the past? You're like, I need John or I need Mary to come with me because I can trust them to turn things around.
Not at my leadership level, but I've definitely brought in people across the organization. I would say at the leadership level, I started new to some degree. Michael Basham, my creative director, was my friend, so I knew that he would be extraordinary. I brought in an executive, Lauren Mossberg, who runs my planning and allocation, which for Brooks Brothers is really complicated because we have a lot of replenishment business, as you can imagine, like the white shirt's out in this store and then we have to bring it back. So she really had a lot of muscle in various areas. So I would say, I feel like, sure, like I have a network. I think for my executive team, I don't think I actually used a recruiter or put anything out there.
You just worked.
I did not.
You looked at your phone.
I worked at Rolodex.
Rolodex. That's
and those are the best people, right?
Yeah, because you know them, you experience them, you have a personal relationship with them to some degree. Yeah. How do you build that? Is that just about age? I mean, you and I have heavy Rolodex because we've failed, we've succeeded, we've accumulated friends, foes, people we admire regardless of friendship, right?
Yeah.
So it's easy because I'm 53. You're probably 28, but still.
I'm 55.
So how do you do it when you're 30?
I think you just have to stay curious, and I think you have to like people, and I think, you just. I think the other piece is like, you don't realize it, but I think as you meet people along the way, you can kind of tell who's going to be a high performer or not.
Yeah.
And I think it's important even at 30 to recognize that, right? Like you're always kind
Well, the book is trying to
I think when you're a
remove the
parent, you're
myth.
like, hang out with the smart kids. I think that you kind of take that in and you just start to build a network, I think. And I think what's also interesting is what's happening now is this idea of like this professional network versus this personal network versus this and that. Like the lines are all blurred, right? And so
Now you're saying, or in the
now,
past.
yeah, more so than ever. And so I think it's easier now to just connect with people.
Do you think it's okay? We can go so many directions in this conversation. I love it. You think it's easier now? I think it's the opposite because I used to go to the office 5 days a week, sometimes 6 or 7 days a week when I was, taking my company public and all that stuff. And I had long-term relationships with people who either worked for me, I worked for to some degree, I work with. Now, a lot of people working off-site, virtual.
Yeah.
Do you think actually they have better ability to create networks of relationships and people in today's world?
I think they can create shallow relationships, but they can create more of them because of what LinkedIn has done and this concept of like, it's not like ding dong, I'm knocking on your door anymore. It's like, hey, let me shoot you this email. Let's grab a coffee. Like that as part of the professional culture, I think is really normalized. So I think there's a lot of speed dating that happens right now, which I think, if your instincts are right, within an hour of a speed date, I think you kind of have a sense of, who's going to help you in your career and who's not, or who has the potential to.
So here's what I hear what you're saying. You're saying, look, because of technology and the world we live in right now, you have an opportunity to get exposed to way more people than if you had a job 20 or 30 years ago. And but you got to get really sharp in analyzing and finding the right person faster because you have so many opportunities.
Yeah, I mean, like, let's just talk about LinkedIn.
Yeah.
The fact that I can just look on LinkedIn and like look for Boaz and see like, is this guy going to help me or not? Like very quickly without a song and dance. I think that just shortens the cycle to kind of like understand people's experiences.
Does it make a relationship transactional? Because we're New Yorkers, so for us, a lot of relationships are very transactional.
Yeah.
And when I go and get exposed to other cultures, when I did business internationally, it's all about the 10th time you have dinner with.
Yeah.
Which is like, as a New Yorker, I was like, enough with the dinners. Like, either look at the documents, exchange information between the attorneys, let's negotiate and come to an agreement, whether you like it or not. Do you think it's a very New York tech-savvy behavior because we're transactional? I can look at LinkedIn and say, okay, Ken is this. He knows that person. I can make 2 phone calls and,
I do think it's transactional. So a friend, a really funny friend said this really interesting thing, and he said, in Miami, what people care about is what kind of car you drive. In San Francisco, people care about what startup you formed. In LA, people care about how young and pretty you are. In New York, people care about what the favor is that you're going to get them. Are you going to get them into that restaurant?
Yeah.
Are you going to connect them with this person, right? I think New York is a city of favors, but I think along the way you make some good friends.
No, we've been friends for a few years. I don't think we ask anyone for any favors, exactly.
And although I asked your wife for a bunch of like theater tickets or
and
something.
my kid babysit your kid, so
yeah,
it's all
that's
good.
true.
Exactly.
See, New York's all about favors. But I do think, I think it's honest, it's real, and it's clear. And I do think even friendships are about a give and take. And I think that that's, part of life here in New York. But I always found that really funny and like kind of like genuinely honest as well.
Yeah, and also we love it. Like we're not hiding. We're not trying.
Right.
Like someone told me in the South, they kill you with a butter knife.
Yeah.
It's like like it's very slow. They're still gonna kill you, but it's with a butter knife. So New York, it is what it is. Perfect. Okay, going back to the turnaround, it's quite fascinating. What was the most challenging thing culturally that you found when you walked in? I mean, let's go to like the drama. You got a phone call. right? You say, okay, Ken, I want you, whomever called you, I want you to step into Brooks Brothers.
Yeah.
Then you did whatever you had to do, prepare yourself, so you came from the industry, so you had experience, all that stuff. What was the most surprising and or challenging thing you found when you walked into a new culture?
The company was extraordinarily insular. Like, it was not a company that was curious, and it was not a company that was interested in, hey, what was happening out there?
It's like, for me, it's like Rolls Royce. It's like, you still have that guy who's kind of sewing the leather seats. You know, you can charge $1 million or more for a car, but they're not interested in innovation or anything. Is that what you found?
Yeah, and I just think like something along the line where the company overly invested in the science of the business, so IT technology platform.
They did invest, or they did not?
They did. They did invest a lot, but then they underinvested in the front end side of the business, so the creative side of the business, the marketing design, growth marketing, digital marketing, like those things were underinvested in. So again, I think it was a company that was really focused on process versus results. And so I think that was probably the biggest cultural change, to say like, hey, let's look outside these four walls. And hey, I know you're doing it like this, but maybe we should look at doing things like that, right? And then also the company was extraordinarily siloed. I don't think teams or various divisions were talking to each other. And so
could you find product, let's just say in the Miami Beach store that did not have on the Fifth Avenue, New York store? Was it that disconnected, or was it just?
No, it was really about like, the merchandising teams weren't talking to the planning teams, weren't talking to the marketing teams, weren't talking to the store teams. And so I think there was a lot of frustration that was built up across various verticals in the company because they were so siloed. And, I remember we did an offsite and we talked a lot about, what are we grateful for? What do we think like is working? What do we think is not working? And I think the most important question to ask a room is like, what needs to be said that's not being said?
And who asked that question? Did you ask it? Or did you
I asked that question.
Did you bring a third party facilitator to kind of ask those questions?
No.
And they were open. I mean, look, here's where I'm stuck, right? So I'm trying to figure out. You're the big sheriff. You come in, your partners, people that it's a big company, bought it from bankruptcy. So there's a part of a regular manager will have an ego element to it, saying, "Look, I'm the new sheriff. I call the shots, right?" At the same time, it sounds like from what you're saying, there was a lot of respect and curiosity around the old way of doing things because they got to where they got for a reason. There's a reason why you were the oldest company in fashion in the United States. So how do you ask those questions? How did they listen to you? If you're the new kid on the block, even though you're the sheriff, how do you start this conversation?
I think it's a lot of, I think it's like just friendships, right? It's like, how do you make friends and how do you get people to trust you?
How do you do it? I know you have a thing, I read it when I prepared, work hard, be nice, right? That's one of your thing, right?
Yeah.
That's what one of the articles told me, that you have. Is that what it is? You actually make a conscious effort to be nice to people when you walk into a new place?
Always. Always. I just think like life is hard. Like, why be a dick? Sorry, maybe we should cut that out.
No, don't cut it out. Exactly.
But like, there's no need for that.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't want to be treated like that. I'm never going to treat anyone like that. So, but I think it's really about spending time together and like getting to know people personally. And I think sometimes like when people are holding on to things, like you have to figure out like, what is that about? Is that about control? Like what's motivating them to like not change or to be so rigid around things, right? So I think, for me, it was really spending a lot of time with the teams socially. So we travel stores a lot out the gate, and so I spent a lot of time with my leadership team just outside of the office. And I love visiting stores because my favorite thing to say is like, when you walk into a store, you can see everything that's working and everything that's not.
Did they know you're coming?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because when I used to visit my sites, I used to not tell people I'm coming sometimes.
Yeah, they hate
because
that.
Well, but the reality is, I can see the mess when when the
Yeah.
boss comes. Of course, everybody's going to clean up and
Yeah.
everybody's going to button up and all that stuff. So, uh, okay, but I want to again. I'm fascinated. The reason I'm pushing back is you're saying everybody got to get along, and you had this listening and the ability. And at the same time, when one turns around a company, there's a lot of firing to do.
Yeah.
Right? And you say don't ever be don't ever be a dick, right? So,
Yeah.
But you probably fired many, many people.
Sure.
So how do you find that balance? How do you gracefully fire people? Some people work there probably for 15, 20, 30 years and you have to let them go.
Yeah.
How do you do that?
I think by the point of when, in the beginning, when I was very clear about who was going to make it and who wasn't based on X, Y, and Z.
For yourself or for the team?
I think it was pretty well known. Like, everyone knew that we had to work quickly. We had to pivot the business right away. I needed everyone all in. I needed their heart and soul in and their commitment in this. And I needed accountability and I needed communication. And so they sort of knew, out
so
the
you
gate.
align expectation. I mean, you kind of like
Align expectations.
Yeah.
And they knew my management
And if they
styles,
didn't, then they went home.
and no one was surprised. And it's not like I was flippant about it. I took it very seriously.
Yeah.
But we saw who the outliers were pretty quickly, particularly on the leadership team. And, I think it's really, really hard when you have to exit people. I mean, it's their livelihood. I think you have to be really sensitive.
Have to exit, that's a nice way to say fire people?
Yeah, I mean, it's really tough. And
That's
it's
corporate talking.
It's
Okay.
the worst part of
Yeah.
my job, but we're a team. And if you had a weak player on a team, you would not allow that player to get on the field with the rest of the team and drive the team down.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean that they're a bad person. It doesn't mean that you don't like them. It means that they're on the wrong team.
You're just not a fit.
And they're not a fit for
Yeah.
the team. And it doesn't mean that they're not capable and they're not smart and they're not talented. And I always make sure that that's communicated. And, the other thing I think that's important for me, and not that this digressed into how I fire people, but, I think it's really important for people to control their own news coming in and coming out.
What do you mean?
Well, if someone, if someone exits, you want them to control the news of their own exit.
Oh, got you. So you're saying it very respectful. You're saying you tell the story to your team instead of me telling the team first
Sure.
and then you finding it. Is that what you mean?
Sure.
I'm trying to.
Yeah.
Okay.
Someone very smart said that people remember the beginning of an experience and the end of an experience, like with their career, right? They remember like the first week and then the last week. So I think that really stuck with me. And you want to always give people a soft landing. And like, I'm not saying in every situation you can do that, but I think it's important to do that. I mean, we're all still human, and we want to be sensitive and we want to be kind. So, and I think, if you run the business and the teams like that, I think people really respect you and they get it. And they know that, I think it's clear. And I think, for me, the other thing that was important in the beginning was just like, we're going to make a shitload of mistakes. We're just going to make mistakes. And we can't do this blame thing. We just have to keep looking forward. And we made a bunch of mistakes in the beginning. And ultimately, I would say, like, we made that mistake. It's on me because I allowed it, approved it, or whatever. Let's just move forward. And I think you do that.
You weren't scared? I mean, Facebook, right? The old move fast, break things, right?
Yeah.
You can do that when you either are the owner or you have substantial amount of support. So weren't you, I mean, you're also a CEO, you have a board, you have, shareholders, all that stuff to be accountable for. They put you in a position, they pay you for that position.
Yeah.
Were you scared that, what if I do the wrong thing and I'll be sent home? Or was it just part of like, hey, they took me, I'll play full on and I'll see how it's going to turn out?
I mean, it's not like I didn't communicate major moves, but
But when you made a mistake, I'm asking like, because you said we made many mistakes because we're trying to figure out who we are, how we turn things around,
Yeah.
how to respect the past and create for the future. Saying that, I'm just trying to think how, I can tell you for myself, when my company went public, there was a shift in the way I saw things. Before that, I was the boss. I had investors always, but I was the boss, and that's it,
Yeah.
Suddenly, like, oh my gosh, what are they going to say? What the report going to say? You
Sure.
think much short term, because like quarterly you think versus
Sure.
like long-term changes. That's one of the challenges.
Yeah.
Were you scared? Were you worried about it? And you said, no, I'm doing the right thing, and if I have to go home, I'm going to go home.
It's such a good question. I don't think I was scared in that moment. You know, I think the
maybe
first
that's
year,
why they got you. Maybe that's why they hired you, because they
first
know
year-
that you're so committed to a vision. They're like, look, he's going to mess up on the way, but I know he's going to follow with his vision. Yeah.
I also told them it was going to be really tough in the first year. I mean, we bought the business with 18 months of inventory. It was
18 months of inventory.
Yeah, and it was
Wow.
suits and shirts, and I had like
Something
a lot
no
of
one
formal
wears.
wear.
Yeah.
And you know, they saw me launching new products. As soon as we launched a new product, I gave one to every single board member, and I'm like, try it, fit it. Like, so like I really brought them in as part of the journey. So I didn't feel like I was doing like making the wrong moves from that perspective. But yeah, I think everybody makes mistakes along the way. I think you hope that they're not material and that they don't, you know, kind of like sink the business, which I don't think any of the choices I made did that. But at the same time, yeah, in the moment, I think you just have to make a lot of decisions when you're restructuring so quickly.
Yes, but here's what I hear. You were committed to communication, which is critical, I think, that you said, look, I'm going on this path. I don't know how it's going to turn out. I know I'm going to work very hard. I know I'm going to do the best I can, but I'm going to ongoingly communicate through the process, which is, I think, is a huge part, because when one is a CEO, you know, there's a reason why there's a YPO in the world, right? Because YPO is like, some people don't want to share outside of that level of management, right? They're like, what if I can't say my problems. I want to just act as if everything is perfect and I'm doing so well. And being committed to communication with your board, with your shareholders, with your team is critical, because they're on the roller coaster with you, up and down. That's what sounds to me like you did very well.
Yeah, and I think it also helped because the first year, I moved my offices into the office of the chairman of the board. I moved into Authentic Brands Group in Jamie Salter's office. So like I was literally with him every day almost. So that was like super fun. And you know, what it did was it made me feel really safe at the same time. I felt supported and it felt safe. And I love walking people through what we're doing. I'm not the type of person that needs a grand reveal. You know, like I think there are a lot of people out there that just want like a grand reveal. Like, don't look at it till it's ready. Like, I like to say to my teams, like, bring me in the first inning, the fourth inning, and the eighth inning. Like, bring me in, like the first, fourth, and eighth. Like, don't bring me in the eighth, because I will be really upset. Because like, if we had to repivot, you just wasted a bunch of innings without communicating. So I hate a grand reveal. Really, really hate it. So like, just tell me what you're planning and thinking, and then get me in the halfway mark and get me at the end. So like, I think I communicate in that same way to the board. And then also just, you know, right now I report into a holding company CEO who, you know, I like to keep close. You know, so I just want to make sure.
When did you know things are turning? What was the kind of like the first, you know, the first sign that's you like, you know what? All this crazy amount of work will be okay. We'll excel. We're turning the huge ship around.
In 2021, the year after, when our inventory, you can like, we gutted through the inventory and we like.
I remember I bought like
and,
things from like at like, you know, outlets for like nothing. And
yeah,
I was like, oh my gosh,
I was trying to get rid of the inventory.
Yeah, I bought it, you know, so don't worry.
And in the back half of 21, I could see that the new product was really starting to click. And then I think that same year, like weddings started to happen and the suiting business started to, I don't want to say it got back to pre-19 levels, but there was starting to see some life there. And all of the above, when we got to the end of 21, I thought to myself, we're going to be okay. We're going to make money. And
you take your foot off the gas then?
No, I doubled down.
Okay, so tell me, what does that mean? Like, why would you double down if things are going well? Why would you, like, aren't you scared you're gonna again spin the system? And because a team can work very, very hard for X amount of time. You can't work all the time, full gas. Like, it's impossible, right?
Yeah.
So, why did you double down?
Because I think at that point we had stabilized the business. So like I could really double down on things that I knew would really pivot the business. So like now we're talking, you take my leadership team, and then we really started investing in that one level down. So like at that director level, bringing in like growth marketers and people that were like looking at CRM and loyalty. And so we really started to hire expertise and then just like push into the details. And then I think I think when you're resetting a brand, it takes a minute to get the energy and the vibe of it correct.
Yeah.
And I think by the end of 21 and 22, we were like learning. We were learning like, okay, this is the vibe. These are the models. This is the way we want the customer to feel when we get into the store. And so that is where like things get very difficult, because the easy work is the easy work against like the product, this, that, and the other. And then like you get into this round two where like it's a lot of detailed work with not as much return.
Yeah.
And so like your first inning, you get like lots of return. You can broad base, like stroke the business and like fix it and like make it profitable. Like that second inning is like where it's like precision, detail, rigor. And like that's where I would say for me, emotionally, I pushed us harder.
Was it with the same team? Because many times the original creators, aggressive growth, they don't, when you come to more infrastructure, systems, KPIs, it's no longer the same team because they don't know how to do that. They're very good in the beginning. They're very good about like turning things around or creating stuff. And then you have to bring people who are more gray or they have a different talent, not to say something bad about them. Did you succeed using the same team for the second phase, which is more challenging and less sexy?
50-50. I think that's a good point. I mean, I think sometimes you have, you bring somebody in, 3 years, they contribute like a significant amount to move you forward, and then they kind of hit a wall. And then you realize like you need a different skill set to get you to the next level. And so you really have to figure out like how to repivot. And that has happened a lot. And I think that's natural for business. And I think it's natural for the market. When you look at, when you look at people and you look at their resumes now, it's really normal to turn every 3 to 5 years, right? Where historically it was like, what, you haven't been there for 25 years? And I think that's the nature of like the speed in the business. And then also businesses optimizing to make sure that they're high performing. And so, yeah, I had to do that. We had to do that. That's real. And I think the other thing that happens is like, we're a very small company. I think people would be surprised to know that, call it, we have 200 people at corporate. Yeah.
Including all the way down to the stores?
No. Stores we have, call it 2,000 in the US, but like just the sheer corporate team is a little north of 200. But, sometimes you have team members that they hit a wall in their career and they want to move forward. So like, I'm just really open to that. I really support people when they want to leave and they, when they want to move to their next place, even our high performers, because I think that I can't do anything for them and I would hate to hold anyone back. But we did go through that cycle and we continue to go through that cycle in various parts of the business.
Yeah. Do you have a playbook? I mean, now when you were, I don't know now, but recently you moved to Eddie Bauer, like you added another responsibility. Do you feel like you have a playbook now? You're like, okay, here's what we've done in 2022 or 2021 or 2020. Now I can use the same playbook, or it's from the beginning, let's go, roll the sleeves, figure it out. It's not the same thing. Just my wisdom and my experience is what's going to guide me.
No, I mean, I think it's like 70%. Every business is very different, and Eddie Bauer is very different than Brooks Brothers in a lot of way. But I think in a turnaround, getting the product right and getting the brand vibe is like everything. Like you have to get that right, and I think you have to set a North Star for the brand very quickly, and I think you have to be really clear about where you're headed because the organization is going to thrash, right? So I think that is the same, and I think the nuances of who you bring along in that journey and in what order and what products and what are we talking about and how do we activate that, all that's different. But I think the basics is like everything is about the product.
Is it easier this time? Because you've done it only 5 years ago? I mean, I know for you, you worked very hard, but it's still only 5 years ago.
Yeah, I think it's, I know the play, but I would say that Eddie Bauer, without getting too detailed about Eddie Bauer specifically, but Brooks Brothers really had the tailwind of weddings coming back and a lot of things happening. And I think Eddie Bauer, the outdoor space is really challenged. We have global warming happening. Yes, it's true. So like that heavy outdoor business is like structurally going to be challenged. And so the pivot is harder, bigger, faster. So we're pushing the business right now.
Yeah. Wow, that's incredible. Okay, I have a bunch of questions that is not to do. So it seems to me, and I know you a little bit. You work very hard, right?
I try.
Well,
I try to get home every night to have dinner with my
you
kids.
do.
I
That's
do.
amazing. Wow.
I do.
How do you do that with all the traveling and everything? Is it because
well,
of your commitment? Because
the days that I'm home or I don't have dinners, I have tried to cut out like nonsense business dinners. Yeah, I'm like very disciplined about. So I think the big thing that I do is I drive in to work and
so you
I
work
drive home.
you work on.
I take morning calls, so like it literally extends my
Yeah, of
my
course.
day an hour. And like
It's an hour
you
in the
know, I think
office.
when you're executive, you have like all these residual calls and residual conversations that you didn't get to. So like I have those literally between 8 and 8:30 and 6 and 6:30 every day. So that's really been important to me. And I think, you know, for me, just really thinking through what the non-negotiables are for myself and
What
for
are
my
the
career.
non-negotiable? Give us example if you don't have to show all of them. But some
Okay,
of them.
I think family first. And so, like, if I ever feel like family is becoming a second and career is becoming a first, like, I think I have a big problem with that. So I think that gets back to like getting home for dinner and like pushing hard. And if it means like, you know, I have to bang out an email, I have to get on a call at 8:30 p.m., like so be it. But like,
You're gonna have dinner and then you're gonna go.
yeah,
and
let me
say,
try to have
another hour.
Yeah, if I have to do that, I'll do that. I think the second thing is really having control over product and brand and vibe and the customer experience and emotion of what they go through is like very, very important to me.
So you're very hands-on for that. There's things that you let other people manage, but this one, you like it has to go through me. I had to be involved. I'm not saying you though.
Yeah,
Yes.
no, I trust my teams to execute,
Yeah.
but like building that framework is important to me, and like making sure that my handwriting is on that is really important. And then I would say, you know, I definitely want to work with nice people, making sure that, you know, I think if you're not having fun at work and you're not laughing, we're in trouble. So
Yeah, because you're spending 8, 10, 12 hours a day. If you're going to be miserable those 12 hours, you spend more time at work than not just you, all of us.
Yeah.
Than anywhere with our kids, with our families, with our hobbies, with sleeping. Like you have to at least get fulfilled, get satisfied, have fun, etc. Yeah.
Plus, like our industry should be fun. It's
Yeah,
fashion,
that's
right?
true,
And
yeah.
so
Yeah.
I really want to make sure that I'm working with great people.
How do you charge your batteries?
I try to be in bed by 10:30.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
I'm really kind of like, I try to be very strict about sleep. It's really important to me. I nap on Saturdays and Sundays, full disclosure. I'm very diligent about exercise. So I'll be up by, you know, call it 6:30. I get to the gym between 6:30 and 7:30. I'm back by 7:30. I have breakfast with the kids, and then I get in the car and, you know, head out. So like that routine, and then I try to do really big workouts on Saturdays and Sundays. So I'm pretty disciplined about that, and we were talking about it earlier. But I do like to meditate and you know, do a bunch of yoga, and I journal a lot, and so like I do
Journal.
Yeah.
Is it for you or for ideas? Because I journal when I need like to brainstorm on a new product, a new workshop I'm running, or anything like that. I don't. Why do you journal?
I freestyle journal. So it could
Explain
be
to
like,
me what does that mean?
freestyle journaling is like, it's whatever mood you're in, you write it down, and sometimes
So
I
instead
think,
of like having thoughts in your mind, you just kind of put it on a paper. You
Yeah.
just write your thoughts.
yeah, or
Okay.
like, you know, there are moments where I have ideas, or there are moments where I have like a business idea, or like, you know, and then there are moments where I'm really dealing with a problem, or I have anxiety over something, and I think journaling really helps me to create that space to put it somewhere else.
So you
besides my
feel
head.
like I don't know anything about it. So when you write it down, do you feel like it kind of you let it go to some degree? If you have anxiety around something, or you're nervous or anxious or angry about something,
Yeah.
if you write it down, does it kind of like now it's out of my system to some degree?
Yeah, I think so. And I think there's something really powerful about articulating your anxiety, or, you know, things that are bothering you, or things that like you don't know what's going on, but you know something's not sitting right. And sometimes when you start journaling, I think those things really come to life. And I do think it's important to be in touch with things that are great about your life and things that aren't great about your life, and things that are working and things that aren't working. And I think that balance, and when we're both in YPO, so we're both used to speaking like that. But I do think that creates balance in my life, and I think it really works for me as an executive.
Yeah, well, cool. Okay, I have two more questions.
Okay.
One, just because a lot of people, how one dresses for an interview? I mean, you're an expert. You come from the business world. You're in the fashion world. Do you have advice, tip? Because I get different responses. I'd love to hear your.
I think you really need to
it.
understand what the culture of the organization that you're interviewing.
So do you change the way you dress based on who you're interviewing? You think?
I think I would, and then what I would do is look at the baseline organization, and then I would bring it up a notch formal. So, like for example, like if it's a startup and they're dressed like Asher, and they're wearing like jeans and a t-shirt, like
don't show up in a suit.
I would not show up in a suit, but I would show up in maybe like a polo shirt, like a cool blazer, like dark jeans and sneakers, right?
It shows you professional. You care about it. Like what's the thinking behind it?
It's one level. I would think that it's one level of, hey, I recognize that this is a serious conversation, or I recognize that I want you to know that I'm taking things seriously. So I would just amp it up one level.
How important is it? Do you judge people when they walk in? If someone walks in with like t-shirt and jeans, you're like, no, not going to fit into this culture.
I mean, I think that's a difficult question, because I think that it really is about what that person. I mean, I think if it's a job interview, to be quite frank, like if you're relying on them to be a tastemaker, you want to make sure that they have good taste, right? But if they're like, in some role that it doesn't matter,
some marketing or some
then
real estate,
no. But like ultimately, what's most important to me in an interview is that I can tell that they care and they're going to try, and I think that's really important to me.
Yeah, because I remember when I was in real estate, we had a dress code, and the dress code was jeans, so you look like you can go on the construction site. You just like nice watch and shoes, so you show you're successful. So it has to be like jewelry, like you had to wear an expensive watch. And then a button shirt, because you still corporate, you know what I'm saying? And that was how you dressed up for real estate. If you had roadshow or anything, it was designed to look a particular way. Do you think one need to spend time on kind of really understand the culture they go into interview, and just say, look, I think I'm dressed professional and respectful to the place I'm going into?
No, I mean, I think it gets back to, I think you have to recalibrate to the culture that you're interviewing against. I think what you're doing is like talking about a uniform. And like, I think organizations do have a uniform, but I would just increase that level of refinement one level.
Awesome.
So like in your example,
I didn't know who to ask, but my kids
I
want to
think
go
in
to
your
interview
example, like maybe put a blazer on and like it would like bring it up a notch.
Yeah. Okay, cool, great. And then the last thing is, from every conversation we had, whether it's for jazz musician, politicians so far, business people, technology and AI is changing the world.
Yeah.
Completely changed the world. Is that something you're dealing with, thinking about? How do you think fashion and your industry is going to change in the next few years? Because we have a guest coming to us, and he said to me, we're the last Homo sapiens.
Yeah.
Literally, like that's his statement. I was like, how do you're someone who's, you said earlier in the conversation, I need to predict the future. I need to predict what's, not just the color of my shirt, but the world is changing. What are you guys doing around it?
I think, so I think for me right now, just personally, I'm using a lot of AI right now. I'm like getting used to it. I'm getting familiar with it. I did something recently where, I had a customer letter, and I literally put deep research about myself, and I asked AI to write that letter for myself. Yeah, and it's like, it's incredible what it gives back. But at the same time, you realize like there's still a lot of editing that needs to get done. It's an interesting question, and let me just answer it a different way. I have two boys. They're 13, as you know, and one of them did ask me, they're like, what subjects do you care about? Because he's like, I don't want to get an A in everything, but like, what do you care about? And I thought that was like such a great question. And what I told him was, I said AI is going to be important for you, and not that I want to be counter to anything from an education perspective, but
no, actually, I think the challenge is, like I see in my kids' school, especially in the high school, they are anti-artificial intelligence, which is mind-blowing to me because it's going to take over.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying don't develop. I don't know the answer. I'm not an educator. I don't think that we can ignore it because it's going to take over everything, right? Saying that, at the same time, you want people to, the kids, to learn how to think by themselves and come up with ideas. So I totally get that challenge, right? But in your company, except for using it for emails and better deep research, do you actually think about how people are going to dress and what's the trends in marketing? Do you actually use it?
I think it's going to do. Okay, so let me go back and tell you what I told my kid.
Oh, sorry, apologies.
I told my kid,
Yeah.
I think the arts is incredibly important, creative arts, and I think math is important. And while AI will figure out math for you, I do think it's a good foundation for thinking about business in a way that when numbers roll up into your head in a certain way and very quickly, I think you can connect the dots around business very quickly. So, and I think the arts is going to always be important because there are things that AI, it's not going to think about on its own, and it's not going to be able to create on its own. So if you can see something that other people can't see, or if you can dream something that AI can't dream, I think that that's really a huge unlock. And
which is the world you live in, right?
Which is the world we live in.
Yeah, not just we, but you personally. You started the conversation an hour ago saying, look, I love the two worlds of art, fashion, fun, and business. And I have to find that balance every day between the two. I mean, I'm paraphrasing what you said, but that's what I do as a CEO of a fashion company, right? So you said to your kid, basically, bring art, but bring math, and find that dance between the two.
Yeah. And I think it's that back and forth. But I do think, as I think about AI in the future, I think there are places where it's going to be extraordinary. To really look at data, pattern, how we sell, where we sell. Because ultimately, getting the right inventory to the right place at the right time is how you make money in my business, right? And I think AI will do a lot of that heavy lift.
Will they do the design?
I think that it can do some of it. I think it can't do all of it. And I think the more the designers figure out how to make AI a tool in their toolbox, I think that that's really going to be the unlock. So yeah,
I mean,
I think, am I scared? I think I am 20% scared, 80% very curious.
That's awesome. Okay, so we covered turnaround, coming from, grew up in Long Island and learning accounting all the way to AI and how to dress to an outfit.
Yeah, we covered a lot.
To an interview. That's amazing,
in a short
Ken.
period of time.
Exactly. Thank you so much, Ken, for being here.
Of course.
It's been really a pleasure, and it's extraordinary. I can't wait to hear more about your next venture and turn things around.
Thank you.
Of course. Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Okay, Playbook. I want to talk about team today. Most people confuse friendship with teams when they want to be top performers. Friends are people who are there for good and bad, you can have fun with. It's important to have friends, to have social life. That's critical. But when you come to work on a project, sometimes the team is not a fit to be your friends. What do I mean by that? It doesn't mean you cannot have friendship with them. It doesn't mean that you cannot choose people that you love to hang out with. But you really want to look from a puzzle perspective. What do I mean by that? You want to look at the entire picture, the mosaic of what is needed. And you might need someone on the team that will not be your friend. You can work with someone and they can be extraordinary. They can be supportive. They can be people who elevate you, and you don't have to like them. I'm not saying hate them. Obviously, you want to work with people that you enjoy working with. But when one puts together a team, you got to think on the whole picture. Very different than friends. Because when it comes to friends, most of us surround ourselves with people who we love, and they are very close to us. There's a saying that if you take your 5 best friends and you average their salary, you will find your salary in it. So if you take 5 people and you average 5 friends and you average their salary, you're going to find probably that your salary is similar. Why? Because we surround ourselves with people who are similar to us. When it comes to a team on your project, very different. You want someone who's going to be able to be tough, way tougher than just one of your friends. You want to be someone who's going to provide some knowledge, something you know nothing about. It's completely okay. Now, when you start, you say, where do I find those people? Because naturally, you're going to ask for friends, you're going to ask for help from friends of yours. Okay. So first of all, get clear what you need. Then see, do I have in my immediate circle people that I can ask to do that? But if you don't, and you probably will not, because again, not everyone you need is what actually going to be your friends. So there you're going to be, okay, what can I offer them to be part of my team? And that's critical for you because most people fail because they don't have the right team around us. They might be working very hard. They have a vision. They have a commitment to run a marathon or open a new business or open a restaurant or doing something. But the people around there are not supportive enough. So think about a team more as a net under you that will catch you when things don't go well and also bounce you back to where you were or even higher than where you were before, and separate from just being your friends. It's critical not to confuse friends and teams. That's a playbook today.